We're going back to page 41. A voice in the heart uttered the unspoken name. A dream of seeking thought, wandering through space, entered the invisible and the forbidden house. The treasure was found of a supernal day. Where is this supernal, spiritual, divine day in what is normally considered to be darkness? That is the whole mystery. As if the guidance comes from within, the soul, the inner consciousness, the voice, entered the invisible and forbidden house of subconscious, of darkness, usually something that we seek to move away from if we want to seek the divine. He says, deep inside that are the treasures of the spirit. This is one of the things that is also typical of Sri Aurobindo, the plunging down of the divine into the absolute darkness, so that from below a new manifestation of light can happen. This is not possible unless one has, first of all, recognized what is the light, the worlds of truth, the worlds of consciousness. With that inside, within, contained in the heart, the consciousness of the seeker, he takes the plunge. It is not easy for one who has only worked on his higher nature, one who has also taken that plunge to go deep inside the subconscious and there find that the treasures of a possibility of a new manifestation are hidden. This is shown by her jewel lamp. The jewel lamp is that of inspiration, or rather intuition, which is a direct projection of the light, and that breaks the densities of darkness. And that lamp lifted, it showed the riches of the cave. And that is something that several occultists have spoken of. The deep below, not only high above, deep below, at the base of manifestation, are all the possibilities of the spirit, of its manifestation of perfection. But the outer nature is so narrow, so difficult to convince. It does not allow the individual to break out of this narrowness very easily. So he says, lifted, it showed the riches of the cave where, by the miser traffickers of sense, unused, guarded beneath night's dragon paws, in folds of velvet darkness, draped, they sleep, whose priceless value could have saved the world. That is the whole secret. It is not by running away from the lower worlds to reach the heights. That is the first stage. But having arrived at the heights of consciousness, to look down with that light, with that intuition, with that vision, seeing that below, holding up the universe, there are the powers of infinite manifestation of truth, all possibilities of perfection. But this is central to Sri Aurobindo, the involution which is waiting to emerge. It will not emerge before it is time. Into evolution. Involution becomes evolution. Therefore, they remain unused. Usually we think that in the lower nature there is only darkness. That's how it looks like, that's how it seems. Because they are guarded, these treasures, beneath night's dragon paws. He gives you the image of a fierce guard. The dragon is a powerful energy. A dragon will not permit any ordinary, just mental seeker to break behind his, to move him away and look deep into the depths. Because he is not just energy. In the ancient world, the energy was also wisdom. In India, we often use the image of the snake. In the Far East, very often the image of the dragon. The dragon is a force, but on the divine plane, power is also consciousness, Chit Shakti. So the dragon is also a being who is wise. It will not permit any lesser individual to push him aside and plunge into the depths. So this is where the nature of the seeker, who is not only a seeker of knowledge, but is also a possessor of power, conscious force. He enters into the darkness, and there he finds all the possibilities of manifestation of perfection. That has to be the final expression. A darkness carrying morning in its breast. There he's told you. Just like the secret of light is hidden in the darkness. So our mental opposition between darkness and light, that one is the opposite of the other, as it seems to be on the surface, is no longer true when you see behind, in the play of the divine plan, that it is something that is a totality. The universal play is something that is, Sri Aurobindo uses the image spherical or global, it is circular. So there is no lower or higher. In the depths are the heights. In the darkness are hidden the treasures of light. But one has to have that fearlessness, that courage, which comes from absolute certitude of the divine connection. You are absolutely so firmly connected to the divine that you can plunge into the darkness and not feel lost, and see that strength is the certitude of direct vision, direct knowledge. So a darkness carrying morning in its breast. Out of the darkness is born, or is within the darkness is hidden the light. Looked for the eternal wide returning gleam, because this is a cyclical pattern. And in a cycle, it's not a linear movement. The rise and the fall, the circling, means it is the sense of one play of reality which seems to offer us different aspects. Whereas if we move in a straight line, we leave the past behind and we move towards the future. And it's something that is linear. But if it is circular, you rise, and that gives you the strength to dive deep within, find deep within, which we may call below, that energy, that force that pushes you up again. So it is a spiral. Sri Aurobindo calls it a vertical spiral. You rise to fall. It's not, therefore, what we may sometimes call the sense of defeat, the sense of failure. This is only a temporary, you might say, experience or a limited lack of understanding, which is usually that of the mind. He raises us up in order to throw us down. He throws us down so that he gives us the strength and the energy and the push to rise higher again. And this is the pattern of evolution. It's not a straight line. So he knows that. So this is the returning gleam, the light, just like the light comes after the night, it's always there, waiting the advent of a larger ray. That larger ray where there will no longer be the need for night. For a very long time, in our limited experience and limited consciousness, we need darkness. We cannot bear the pressure of too much light for too long. Therefore, there is a division. We go back into the darkness, and that is part of the divine wisdom and the divine plan. That when your consciousness has widened sufficiently and strengthened and purified itself enough, you are not afraid to go into the deepest and so-called darkness and there find the divine presence. This is exactly what Mother did when she plunged into the very heart of the inconscient and found there the spring that threw her up forthwith into a formless, limitless, vast, vibrating with the seeds of the new world. We have these traditions of the divine asleep beneath the universe, the Lord who is asleep on the eternal snake, immobile. He's immobile, but he is the divine. We don't see him. We see only the divine. If you look for him, we look up for him above. We don't see that moving above from below cannot happen unless below there is an enormous strength, a foundation, a base that is sustaining this whole plan. Like a great building, it has to have a very strong foundation. The foundation here is the supreme presence that is there below. On the basis of that, the whole structure of the universe has grown. So, this is the pattern. But until we have reached that total consciousness, which is that of the supramental, where you see the whole universe as one, that is not divided between the lower and the higher, the dark and the light. Until then, this division is there. And that is an image of the forces that are sustaining the world of darkness. These are the lower beings. They have been pushed into the darkness to uphold this lower nature. They too are, in a sense, drawn to the light. And so you have the image of them stealing the cows of light, the lost herds of the sun, and they have hidden them in the caves. Perhaps there is a significance that we have to go deep into the subconscious caves, deep into even the inconscient, as Mother did, to find the cows of light. The cow symbolizes the embodiment of light. Go is really one of the true meanings of the word go is light. It's not an animal. So, here this is the Vedic myth. A darkness carrying morning in its breast looked for the eternal wide returning gleam, waiting the advent of a larger ray and rescue of the lost herds of the sun. They are the herds of the sun. The source of all light is the sun. And these embodiments of light have attracted the lower beings. They have taken them and hidden them in the darkest caves. These are the Pishachas. They are not even the Rakshasas, they are the Pishachas, the lowest of the low. And there also you see the thing that they want this light for themselves. The cows of light are hidden in the darkness. We have to bring them out of the darkness. So this is the whole play and pattern of the journey of consciousness. This actually has many references to the ancient mysteries that are there in the Vedas and the Upanishads. Or he takes another image now from the Hebrew mysteries. All ancient cultures have these aspects of spiritual knowledge which were known as the mysteries. They are not mental, but something that is of the same genre, he says, in a splendid extravagance of the waste of God, dropped carelessly in creation's spent thrift work, left in the chantiers of the bottomless world, and stolen by the robbers of the deep, the golden shekels of the eternal lie, hoarded from touch and view and thought's desire, locked in blind anthers of the ignorant flood, lest men should find them and be even as gods. So this gold is the symbol again, like the cow, the symbol of light, of the supreme. And this should not be too easily acquired. We have to be ready to receive and manifest the light. If simply there is a transmission of knowledge, as later happened, that the guru teaches the student and the student teaches the next student, simply by oral transmission, that inner experience is slowly diluted and in the end lost. The original method was that each student had to live the experience. He did not have to learn, he had to live the experience. Otherwise, you see, we get like we are reading Sri Aurobindo, but what we should really do is to try to live, even to a small degree, what we are reading. And then it would be realized the transformative power that is there in the words. They are not words, they are forces. Forces of change, forces of consciousness. And here he speaks, because in the ancient Hebrew tradition, there is also a great deal of spiritual and occult knowledge. Every culture had it. So here he gives the image of creation and the chantiers of creation. Chantiers is, like the building and the scaffolding, and in order to build, you have to dig a foundation, and in the digging of the foundation, you have to go below the soil, you have to go deep within, and there it is as if the divine has dropped his wisdom, his light, his golden shekel. Shekel is the coin, Hebrew coin for golden coin. So he has, as if he's very extravagant. God is extravagant, is one who is very wasteful. The divine is wasteful. He's given us everything. The world is unworthy to receive that wealth of knowledge. We are not really careful about what he has given us. The mother's given us everything. And we don't really value it, we don't make use of it. But still the gift is given. And it continues to be given. So in a sense, this is the divine who is extravagant and spendthrift, the same thing. So in a splendid, but it's wonderful. Because if each of us had to deserve the wealth that is given, we had to wait perhaps eternities. It would take so long for us to be worthy of that which is being given. So it is what is given slowly perhaps molds, shapes, makes us gradually a little less unworthy, if you can put it like that. So it's a splendid extravagance of the waste of God. He dropped carelessly, because he's the possessor of the whole universe. So he is very careless with his wealth. Spendthrift work, creation is a projection of his consciousness. The universe and creation is a projection of the divine consciousness. And in that creation, there is a whole structure. And in that structure, he has dropped in the chantiers of the bottomless deep. The deep, which has an article, it means ocean. It doesn't just mean depth. The deep is the sea. A deep is the sea. It's not just deep. So ocean is something that is simply a field, a play of energy, the vital consciousness. In the world of the vital consciousness, the possibilities of change have been cast. Because you have to be alive in order to evolve. You have to enter, you have to not withdraw from life. Whereas in the ancient spiritual traditions, they would say the vital is is something that you have to get out of. Concentrate only on your higher nature, on your soul, and on your mind and your heart, and rise to the higher depths. But it is in the world of life that the change can really be founded. So, this is the deep, the bottomless. There are stolen by the robbers. These are the vital forces. They too are attracted to the world of light. But they are what they are. Each force is an embodiment of the role that has been given to him. On the lower plane are forces that are outwardly what we may call inferior forces. But if they did not exist, we would never reject them to rise higher. So they have a part to play. In the deep, in the vital world, there are beings of passion and violence. These are the robbers of. But they give you the energy, but they have very strongly what we also have, a tremendous ego. And so they want to keep this light, this treasure to themselves. Because sometimes the more knowledge you have, unless you have purified your being, it also gives you a sense of your own personal greatness. And the ego gets more and more magnified. So they want this wealth, the golden shekels, the divine, hoarded from touch and view and thought's desire. They keep it for themselves. They hide it from the human seeker who wants to take them from touch and view and thought's desire. Locked in blind anthers. Anthers are deep caves, big caves where normally wild animals, very fierce animals like tigers, they live. It's like a den. So in the vital world, there are huge forces, and these forces have not accepted to surrender themselves. At a certain stage, this is the problem, as Mother has spoken of, the great asuras, for instance, the 4 great asuras. They are enormous titans, they are powers of falsehood and suffering and death and unconsciousness. If they accept to surrender, then it is the beginning of a new world. If they offer themselves to the divine, because they are also projections of the divine creatrix, she has made them. But at some point, their sense of personal greatness made them feel so powerful, which is what happens also in the life of man, when we have enormous, you might say, talent, genius, greatness. We have to be very careful not to be swept away by our own self-importance. Then we have lost that greatness. We have to realize it is not I who am creating this painting or this poem or this music. It is the Supreme using me as the instrument. But this is not easy, because the instrument itself has its own sense of greatness. They are the original creators. So they take much longer because they have the sense of power. The lesser gods have not deviated from the divine, but they don't have that energy, they don't have the power. So we are more attracted to these forces. They grab us much more easily than the gods of light and joy and love and truth. They remain connected with the Mother, with the Divine, but they don't really have such an impact on the life of the earth as these titanic forces have an impact. They have enormous force, but they have the power of the original creative Shakti. And as she will say, as Sri Aurobindo says later in Book 10, a mother's arms are stretched out towards her rebel sons. They are her sons. They too are safe. If they return to her, if they make their surrender, they can become enormous instruments of the worlds of the future. This is what we have to do. Constantly to remember that we have to be open and surrendered to the original force. The force that we have is not ours. The power that we have is not ours. It has come from somewhere else, and if we realize it is her power, because she is the one who is doing the work. He is the consciousness who stands behind and watches. So if that is why these robbers hoard their treasures in the blind antlers. It's like as if they are like fierce animals of the ignorant flood. The whole cave, the antler is ignorance. The original problem of manifestation that seems to move away from the divine plan, is that we have made ignorance our starting point. We don't realize that within, beneath, below the ignorance is the supreme wisdom. If we can go that far, then we are not any longer lost. But they stay in the grip of these forces lest men should find them and be even as gods. Lest is for fear that, so that if you get a treasure too easily without paying the price of struggle and effort, you don't value it. And this is why, or you don't give it its true value. That's why the wisdom that is hidden in the darkness, the truth that is hidden beneath in the very world of the inconscient and the subconscient, are hoarded by them. Perhaps they are guarding them. Perhaps these robbers of the deep, perhaps these pishachas, they are also playing their role. This is the role allotted to them. That don't show the treasures you have too easily to these human beings who think very highly of themselves, who say because we have some kind of consciousness and we have a search for light and we can grow from lesser to greater, we will acquire them. You cannot really say that is the solution. We have to change from the bottom up. We have to remove the very foundation of ignorance out of which the ego has become the manifest form. That has to go. Until then, we think ourselves to be the greatest that the earth has ever seen. Men think themselves to be even as gods. They are all powerful. They make all the decisions. They even decide whether there is a God or not. They even make all their choices. The sense of simplicity and humility is completely lost. That is why perhaps the highest treasures are guarded by the so-called darkest forces, because we don't dare to go that far. But he, with his direct vision, now with his intuitive knowledge, has plunged there, and he sees with a vision lightened on the viewless heights, a wisdom illumined from the voiceless depths. The vision is on the heights, the wisdom is in the depths. So it is the link between, the bridge between the depths and the heights are bridged. This is there in the God's labor. This is the journey of Sri Aurobindo. That the depths and the heights have to be bridged. And only then you see the presence, the same presence below as it is above. So a vision lightened on the viewless heights, a wisdom illumined from the voiceless depths, a deeper interpretation, great and truth. Our interpretation is based on our capacity to understand. What we see is dependent on our vision. If my vision is short-sighted, I see little. My mind is narrow, I understand little, and that is how it is usually. If my nature is small, I can only absorb a little. But if I can widen myself, my consciousness, and that cannot be done until I remove my ego, which is the obstruction. I can become as vast as the universe. I can see the play of the entire divine consciousness in everything. Otherwise, I interpret things according to my nature, my wisdom, my vision. This is why there are so many different philosophies, so many different religions, each one claiming that it has been able to grasp the truth. Each one has grasped a little fragment of the truth. But to know anything, you have to become that thing. If I want to know the divine, I have to become the divine. I have to remove my little self. It has to be cast away. And this is the ultimate wisdom. This, with the help of the intellect, will never be done. It has to be pushed away. So a deeper interpretation, great and truth, a grand reversal of the night and day. Otherwise, the mind will say, this is darkness, this is light. In the darkness is the light. In the light is the origin of darkness. That is to say, it is a circular pattern. And this is why he describes in the Life Divine the supramental consciousness as a spherical or a circular consciousness where the beginning and the ends are not seen. They are part of one continuous movement. So all the world's values changed, heightening life's aims. Otherwise, as long as we are guided by the mind, one of the most important aspects of the development of the individual is to acquire certain values. What is important and what is not. Not simply moral values as what is good and bad, but what is worth having and what is not worth. Slowly, as we change, our values change. And that is perhaps one of the most important aspects of education. In fact, the most important aspects is the building of the change of consciousness. Slowly, the ability not to rely on external knowledge or perception, but to embody the truth that one is looking for, to become an embodiment of that. Slowly you bring out of yourself that power, that wisdom, that knowledge, that love, that light. So the world's value, the world is a field of experience. It's an expression, it's a manifestation where all experiences are spread out before us. We have to make a journey of consciousness, and we, in the beginning, have to choose the right path and avoid that which will drag us down. But slowly he has now realized that even below are the forces of light. For a long time you avoided the lower nature, which is very helpful for a very long time. But when you are firmly based on the divine connection and you plunge below, you don't lose that divine connection. That is what Mother experimented. She embodied the divine and plunged into the darkness and found that divinity deep inside the inconscient. But you have to reach that state to be able to do so. So then the values of what is darkness, is it the enemy of light? Or is it guarding the greater light from the reach of two beings who are too easily swept away by their little bit of knowledge that they have and think they have all knowledge, they have all wisdom? The greatest treasures are hidden far, far away from the human experience, in the depths in the heights, in the vastnesses. So if we can expand ourselves and dare to be wide and deep and high, then we can see that presence everywhere. This is the universal consciousness. I break out of my littleness and become a universal being, and I see the presence in all things, in all beings. There is no I left. Until then, I am looking for something. This I is my guide. I have no other guide. So I go deep within me and find the essential I, which is the divine presence. And that shows me the way for quite a long time, until I come to the point where I am one, and this is where he has arrived, is one with the highest consciousness and sees the play of that consciousness everywhere. So then, this is where you change your standards, your values, your understanding of things, your interpretations change. So that's a grand reversal of the night and day. All the world's values changed, heightening life's aim. So there is nothing in life that one may not do, as Mother has said. It all depends on what consciousness you have when you do it. You can do an act of outwardly great nobility, nobleness, generosity. But sometimes a very generous person, you look behind and you find that there is the sense of self-satisfaction and self-importance, that I am being so generous, I am helping everybody. So that same action becomes something that really blocks the divine connection. So that is what we have to slowly realize. It is not what we seem to do or seem to be, but what we really are from within. And that is the focus on why we are on the earth, to be manifestations of the divine, and in each person, the possibility of the divine manifestation is latent and has to slowly emerge as and when the person is ready. And that is really the path of true yoga, to prepare oneself for that unification with the divine consciousness and to maintain it at all costs. So he says, a wiser word, a larger thought came in than what the slow labor of human mind can bring. Because our knowledge, our philosophy gives us all kinds of guidances. Our religions give us all kinds of guidances which are helpful while we are at that level. But when we enter into a higher level, we don't require those, we embody that. So it comes in a wider consciousness enters into us. A seek than what the slow labor of human mind, otherwise mind has to struggle constantly, choosing what is right, what is wrong, how should I proceed? Is this what I ought to do? Is this what I ought not to do? There is no absolute certitude. One of the things mind absolutely lacks is certitude. It doesn't have certitude. It has doubts, it has questions, it has all kinds of attempts to understand, but it cannot experience the truth. Certitude comes when you are that. You become what you know, and then there is no question of explaining, no question of doubting, and that is the true wisdom. A secret sense awoke that could perceive a presence and a greatness everywhere. That is the vision, the sense, to see the divine everywhere. In all things, at all times, there is no such thing as undivine. But that comes when one has really acquired the deepest connection, so that even in the darkness one sees the presence of the divine. Even what seems to be an anti-divine being, you see the divine who is at play, because this is a world of multiplicity. In the play of multiplicity, there are expressions that seem to be very diverse. In the diversity, there is darkness, there is light. There is one and there is the other. But in each, it is an aspect of the divine. And the darkness too is an aspect of the divine. in all things, you cannot have light unless you have some knowledge of what is shadow. Then only do you have truth. This universe, the universe was not now this senseless world. Otherwise, it's a meaningless thing. We just come to go. The earth is turning in space for not going anywhere. We also come into this world, live a little while, and then leave it. We don't know what is the purpose. And then come back again and leave it again. It seems to be absolutely pointless. So that great sages have said, just give up this. Withdraw into your soul, which doesn't really ever enter into the trap of the prison of time. It is eternal, it is perfect, and that is where you get the mukti. Otherwise, you enter into this little prison, which is your being, with a little consciousness. You live your little life, and then you withdraw from this. So, this is a senseless world, borne around inert on an immense machine. The machine is the energy, a huge universal Prakriti that is just working to take us nowhere, like a machine that doesn't know why it is at work. It's only a mechanism. But to him, it was no longer so. It cast away its grandiose, lifeless front. It is an immense creation, a huge universal play of energy, but it is not lifeless. It is not a machine. It is a play of the divine intention who is working out his plan through every stage. It cast away its grandiose, lifeless front, a mechanism no more, or work of chance. Chance, little flashes of light here and there, we don't know why, we don't know how. Chance is often a term we use for little, you have a breakthrough for a moment into a world of light or love or joy, always short-lived in our daily existence. And we don't know what has brought it about and why it goes away. So we have coined that word chance. Chance is a term born from our semi-ignorance or even greater ignorance. If I can see the play of the divine intention behind all things, I would not use the word chance. It's all part of a process. But when I can't see the play, I can't see the plan, I live in certain fractions of time. Today it's a very beautiful day. Tomorrow, I don't know. Yesterday was not so beautiful. So I just hold on to the little joy that today has given me, and I'm thankful for it perhaps. But that's it. It's a chance. I have no control. I have no knowledge. I'm ignorant. That is why we use the term chance. We have absolutely no mastery over the play of the manifestation because we are ignorant, we are weak. The universe was not now this senseless world. It cast away its grandiose, lifeless front, a mechanism no more or work of chance, but a living movement of the body of God. That is so beautiful. This world, this manifestation, founded on matter, is the body of the Lord. That is the whole thing. Matter is also divine. Matter is not something we have to reject. What we have to reject is our blindness and ignorance. To see in all things the manifestation of the divine, the body of the world. In that world of matter, a spirit hid enforces and informs. That is a consciousness, that is matter and spirit. That is consciousness and nature. The consciousness for a long time is hidden. A spirit hid enforces and informs was the spectator of the mobile scene. The spirit is steady. The outer play is constantly changing. So it's something that is permanent behind the play of impermanence. There is a conscious spark that is there holding up the play of change. Let in a glow of the unmanifest. This flame, this soul, this spark is there in all. The divine, the supreme, the unmanifest, the eternal, the timeless is part of the world of time. The vast has become the small. In each of us, that small presence is there. The formless everlasting, moved in it. This mobile scene is it. In this play of the mobile scene, the everlasting, unchanging, immobile presence is there. So the play of opposites. The infinite, unchanging presence is there behind this world of constant change, that is shifting, that is moving, seeking its own perfect form in souls and things. That is the purpose of existence. Slowly to manifest in all things, in all beings. Each being is a manifestation of the divine, but it is still incomplete. When we become our true selves, when we become our real selves, we can become really expressions of the divine. So that is the purpose of our existence on the earth, seeking its own perfect form. I have mine, you have yours, each thing has its own, each tree and leaf also has its own aspect of perfection. And it is as if towards that world of perfection, which is already there. Because the goal is already there, you can make a journey towards that goal. That perfection is everlasting. It is towards that all things are moving. And so the present is something we have to give up, slowly to move ahead towards that which we have not yet reached, but which is beckoning, which is calling towards that absolute perfection, which is our goal. And this is a struggle, so this is what we have to work on. Okay?